So a couple of moments ago, someone in the chat was asking me to comment on one of the Reform councillors who got elected, who is 19. So he's still a teenager and he was elected as a Reform UK councillor. And I was already going to talk about him, so I'm glad that you brought it up, because I have a lot to discuss with regards to this, okay? So let's have a look at him. Charles Pugley's the name of the guy. That's him here. Let's see if I can get you a bigger picture of him. And reaction to him being elected as a Reform UK councillor from the kind of liberal Twitter sphere and the liberal commentary sphere has been pretty telling and pretty interesting. So, of course, there's a lot to take in. First of all, he is a young person. Young people are often derided in being politically active as not being people who know what they're talking about. Like, imagine how people reacted when the Labour Party ran on a platform of giving 16-year-olds the right to the vote, which is going to be policy. This was mentioned in the liaison committee in December. They are continuing to plan on doing this, right? And most people responded by saying young people don't know what they are doing in politics. They shouldn't have a right to vote. And I'm like, well, they probably have better functioning brains than some people over the age of 90, and we don't take away their right to vote, and we're right to not take away their right to vote. But if we're going to go about the level to which that they understand what they're doing in the voting booth, I think that we can make the argument for 16-year-olds if we can make the argument for 96-year-olds, you know? Regardless, young people do get derided in politics, and there's been a lot of that. There's been a lot of derision about him being young and being a Reform councillor, and I don't want to engage in that, and I don't think that anyone else should be engaging in that either. The other half of the discussion about who he is and him getting elected for Reform UK is where his class is. Okay, so this tweet here talks about the fact that he owns a real estate company, which shows you that he's very bourgeois. He's quite rich. For the Reform UK party to claim that it's a party of working people when he's literally somebody who is in real estate, which is the opposite of the working class, is pretty jarring, to say the least. And also, according to the Twitterverse as well, he is someone who's been to private school with boarding fees around like the 16k per term cost, which is quite a lot of money to go to boarding school. So that's true. I've not seen the explicit proof, but regardless, he's someone from both a moneyed and posh background, as you can see by the way he looks and the name Charles Pugsley and all that. And what I wanted to have a discussion about is the fact that a lot of people don't quite understand why Reform UK voters, who are broadly working class, who the majority of whom are poorer, they are poorer. The only two parties at the last election that saw a drop in vote share, the richer voters were the Green Party and Reform UK. So Reform UK's electorate is broadly people from poorer backgrounds, from lower income backgrounds. So despite the fact that a bunch of the politicians who get elected for Reform UK, pretty posh, pretty moneyed in terms of their backgrounds. I mean, you only have to look at their MPs, people like Rupert Lowe, who was a banker, Nigel Farage, a commodities broker, Richard Tice is in property, and James McMurdoch, also a banker, and this guy, a property real estate investor. These are hardly salt-of-the-earth working class people, not in the slightest, especially since lots of them went to private school as well, you know? And the common response that you get is, well, all of these people who are voting Reform UK, they're just idiots, they're stupid, because they're just voting for posh people who don't care about them. And what that does is fundamentally misunderstand the ideology that Reform UK represents. What I need to introduce to everyone today is the concept of class collaborationism. So obviously I'm a socialist, I'm a Marxist, I fundamentally view society in economic terms through the conflict between classes, between economic classes specifically, right? I.e. the proletariat, who sell their labour for a wage, and the bourgeois, who buy people's labour because they own the means of production, right? That's the fundamental way, the dialectic that I view society as. If you're a rich person, if you're somebody who is wealthy, you understand that that ideology is dangerous for you. To understand a political ideology that would put you as being the enemy of the vast majority of people, i.e. those who sell their labour for a wage, the proletariat, the majority of the voting electorate, the majority of the population, that's the kind of ideology that you don't want to see be popular. That's the kind of philosophy that, if on a larger scale was put into government, would see you lose access to your resources and would reduce your material conditions, right? And that's the whole point of class conflict. There's a lot of different stuff around class conflict that you can go and research in your own time. I highly recommend Zekzizi's video around class conflict in Marx in Minutes. Really good video to pick up. Anyway, that's what I believe. That's what I believe. Class collaborationism is the opposite of the class consciousness that I advocate for, i.e. the consciousness of all proletarians to come together and understand that regardless of how you sell your labour for a wage, if you're a professional, if you're on the bottom rung, if you're a sole trader, it doesn't matter. The fundamental thing that you share is that class material issue together. You fundamentally share those material interests against the bourgeois who do not share that as part of that conflicting relationship. Class collaborationism is an ideology that tries to find ways of creating unity across classes to try and stop people from finding unity amongst those different ideologies and different classes, okay? So you look at normal working class people supporting Reform UK, a party that is represented by the bourgeois. There has to be an ideology that connects these people together. There has to very, very specifically be an ideology that connects those things together. And there's always ways of trying and doing this, right? In the kind of modern vernacular, we would describe this as divide and rule. Divide and rule being find a cultural issue, find a social issue, find some kind of unifying principle that you can bring these groups together under that isn't about class, that isn't based in economics more broadly. This is where nationalism is used to divide classes, to divide the working class. That's where the divide and rule comes in. Of course, there's other cultural things like talking about racial or gender dynamics or whatever it might be, sexuality. And there's always been a deliberate ploy by powerful right-wingers to sow that kind of disunity so that people get divided over social and cultural issues. GB News are really good at this. Paul Marshall explicitly puts money into these things because it divides people who have shared class interests by their opinions on these social cultural issues. It's why I don't talk about it, because I want people to view things through a class reductionist lens. I want them to think about class and only class as the kind of paramount, as the most important way that they view political discourse. But once you get people caring about things other than class consciousness and things other than the economy and things about the culture war, it's easy to find unity, because there are lots of socially conservative working class people, lots of socially conservative rich and bourgeois people like the people that you see getting elected for Reform UK, and they can always find unity in supporting these particular issues to try and ignore the economic reasons that they don't actually share. And it's important to understand the reason why class collaborationism has been so successful in this country and across the West at the moment too, is because there's been a lot of propaganda, of course, because we're seeing capitalism in decline. When people see their living standards decline more broadly in the capitalist West, is by trying to get them to blame a scapegoat, blame some kind of cultural or social scapegoat for it, to maintain this class collaborationist alliance between the proletariat and the bourgeois. And on top of this, liberals also do class collaborationism. There has been a long trend, especially in the neoliberal era, of liberal class collaborationism. But it's in the opposite direction. It is not trying to unify people around the social conservatism, it is unifying around social liberalism. You've seen this, we've all seen corporate wokeness, right? The left, we hate this. On the actual Marxist left, we call this rainbow capitalism, we despise this. But right-wingers have been primed to think that that's what the left believe, that we support things such as rainbow capitalism, because it's created a class collaboration between the bourgeois socially liberals and the proletarian socially liberals. And that's a big problem for us. That's a big problem for the left, who broadly support socially progressive policies, but we don't support rainbow capitalism. And liberals will play into this. One of the big reasons why the left have been so maligned is that liberals have taken on the mantle of the left, pushed class collaborationism, and not just pushed it themselves in terms of what they espouse personally, but they've used it as a way of attacking working class social conservatives who disagree with them. And they don't attack them on the grounds of the ideology. They attack them for being working class, which is crazy stuff. Like, you've all seen these things. You've all seen this. Everyone who voted Brexit is stupid and racist. You've seen people say, well, the only people who vote reform do so because they're morons and they don't know what's good for them. This is all primed to make these working class people support the right wing in a reactionary manner. There's an incredible clip from Eddie Dempsey that I'm going to play now that kind of describes the way in which this class collaborationism from liberals has created a reactionary radical right that we see today. Let me find it.
And I tell you, the problem we've got in the left is, as the institutions of the working class and their jobs have been removed from around this country, some of their institutions been taken over by the liberals. And that is a problem for us. Because I can tell you what, whatever you think about people that turn out for Tommy Robinson demos or any other march like that, the one thing that unites them people, beyond whatever other bigotry that's going on, is their hatred of the liberal left. And they are right to hate them. They are correct. Because they are the people who have seen their industries taken away, who have captured their Labour Party, and are now talking to them like they're the scum of the earth.
And that's it. A lot of this is reactionary. It's just deliberately described as reactionary because it's reactionary towards a very kind of denigrating attitude that class collaborationist liberals view them as. People who support parties like the Liberal Democrats, for example, a liberal party which is socially progressive, these people will talk down those who have views that differ from them on specifically Brexit, which I think was a real kind of point of inflection in the way we had political discourse in this country that caused this kind of discourse to be paramount by literally saying everyone who voted Brexit is stupid when people did for all sorts of reasons. People wanted immigration down for bogus economic reasons, potentially, right? I disagree with them, but whatever, that's what they voted for. They voted for it on the grounds of wanting more protectionism, even though I think the EU is pretty protectionist within itself rather than between countries in the EU, for example. There were loads of different reasons why somebody might have voted Brexit, and liberals just derided them, especially the working class people, as being stupid for doing so. And that, again, is class collaborationism, because they are supporting what is broadly a kind of corporate plan for the UK remaining in the European Union, because that's good for their business profits, rather than whether it's good for workers or not. And I think it probably would have been good in terms of the overall wages and prosperity for workers, but that's a different story. Either way, it's the attitude that I'm talking about here. This was seized upon. This was deliberately seized upon by the right, so that the unifying principle that the radical right can find is the is nationalism. It's ethnic nationalism, right? It's talking about the imagined community of what defines Britishness. Whereas liberalism will talk about the nation state, but within the kind of the socially liberal realm and people together in the communities themselves, rather than this kind of totemic nation of citizenship and Britishness that makes you kind of reactionary and anti-immigrant in the way that we've seen in the last kind of 12 months with the riots that broke out, etc., etc. And that's the biggest problem, as Eddie points out in that clip we just saw right there, with those who will essentially completely dismiss anyone who votes for Reform UK, right? I even said this on stream the other day, you know, I have basically zero sympathy for the kind of the centrists who push the kind of politics that we're seeing at the moment, you know, but I have infinite sympathy for the people from these devastated communities who saw their only kind of vehicle for political change become what Eddie goes on to say is a political party that aims to create a coalition of middle-income people, social progressives and ethnic minorities, rather than social progressive ethnic minorities and working-class people, because that's how they would win elections in a homeowners world post-right to buy. But this is all kind of electoral calculations that New Labour made to try and stop being a working-class party that they were throughout the entirety of the Thatcher era, which has caused this kind of reaction towards liberal politics in this country from the radical right. So if we want to win back Reform UK supporters, if we want to win them back to our cause, we have to talk in class reductionist terms. We have to specifically try and build bridges around class consciousness, around material issues. It's worth pointing out that a lack of class consciousness can probably be attributed to the fact that Marxism, class conflict, all of these different things that are understood broadly across the world have been completely excised from economic and political and philosophical discourse in the UK, in Western Europe, in the US, for example, for a very, very long time. People don't understand materialist analysis of politics very much at all nowadays. They really don't understand it. not been taught it. So they're only taught to view things through a social lens, right? The moral of this story is, and the thing I really want people to take away from what I'm saying here, is that if you don't get why a working class Reform UK supporter would vote for a posh person like Charles Pugsley or Rupert Lowe or Nigel Farage, you don't understand their ideology and their values. People's values can change, of course, right? The realization of the bonds of nationalism rather than the bonds of class is something that you can undo and then redo with class consciousness, right? You can make these people find class consciousness, but the first thing that you have to do is stop deriding them for the things that they believe, and second of all, to empathize with them with the concerns that they have with regards to the economic questions, and then use that to sell them on class consciousness. And only the left can do that. Only the actual, genuine, materially Marxist left can do that, because liberals will not do that. Because again, liberals are also class collaborationists that do not have class unity. We have seen this immediately. Ever since the Labour Party raised taxes on national insurance on employers, for example, a bunch of their liberal supporters got really mad because they genuinely believe in the power of business in a way that a lot of people who actually vote for Reform UK haven't really bought into. If you have a look at the two parties, again, are most suspicious of the rich, of the powerful, of corporations, it's Reform UK and the Greens. And you've got to understand why Reform UK voters can be sceptical of corporate power and the rich, whilst also voting for rich people, because they perceive that the rich people are undoing the national unity rather than the class unity. And that's what we have to understand, right? The main thing that kind of made me talk about this today is a clip that I saw of Jenny Jones on Twitter, where she essentially said, I don't understand why people vote for reform. Let me find it.
I cannot get into the mind of the average reform voter, I'm afraid. I don't know why they vote reform, and and watching him just now, I actually agreed with a couple of things he said. Reform doesn't have any policies, it doesn't have a plan, and of course Nigel Farage isn't fit to be Prime Minister. So, you know, sometimes we can agree with people that we've got nothing else in common with.
In the middle are the voters, and it is important, Jenny Jones, that you do know why people vote reform, because they beat you 2-1. They've got 14%, you've got about 6 or 7. So why do you think reform, light blue, beats green?
I think there's been a lot of dissatisfaction about the way that politics has been going. And I mean, to be honest, for me, the Labour government moving to try to take all these reform voters away from the Tories means there's space for the Greens.
OK, that's an answer to a different question.
And that's the problem, is that she can't even try and empathise with people who are feeling dissatisfied with politics. She's a baroness, for fuck's sake. She's a professional politician. It's her job to understand how people think, and she can't even empathise with huge swathes of the electorate. Like, the party is literally in first place in the polls right now, and she doesn't understand why people would vote for them. She says, well, Nigel Farage isn't fit to be Prime Minister. These people certainly think so. 33% of the population, potentially, according to Find Out Now, think Nigel Farage could be somebody who could be Prime Minister, because they're happy to vote for Reform UK. You have to understand what drives these people and understand how you sell your values to them to get them to change their mind. A lot of Reform UK voters are amenable to the Green Party's platform. They have concerns, and the last thing that we need if we want to win these people over is you telling these people that you literally don't understand them as a fucking member of the House of Lords. And in reality is that Reform UK represent something outside of Westminster. I think there are a lot of people who don't look into the things that they really support. They just see them as the only viable alternative that is insurgent to the mainstream political class, right? And we can, of course, fill that gap. But there are some people who genuinely are sold on the party brand and the party ideology. But my point is that that's not necessarily set in stone. It's not necessarily set in stone. Every single one of those people who thinks that the reason why their high streets are dead, the reason why the area of the country they live has got no investment, no prosperity, no nothing, is because of the globalists who are undermining Britain as a national unit, rather than corporations who are stripping away all value through surplus value extraction and a lack of workers' rights, you know? Like, these people are people we can win over on economic policy, but it involves empathy. It involves understanding their concerns and their values. And people like Jenny Jones are the biggest bulwark. They are the liberal bulwark against finding unity with these people and selling them on our ideology and our philosophy and our ideas and our policies. This is why I back Zach Polanski for leader, because at the very least, he tries to understand. He might not be able to win these people over. He's talking in a lot of languages that they may not have some kind of level of attraction to, things like social and racial justice, for example, you know. But at the very least, he's not dismissing them. He's not dismissing them out of hand, and he does want to be able to win their votes by appealing to them and trying to win them over class consciousness, rather than just dismissing them as people who don't know what they're voting for, which has been the refrain from Liberals for far too long. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.